This episode of Audiology Marketing Now is made possible by SendPepper, the world's first automated direct mail and email marketing software designed for small businesses. Sign up for a free trial at sendpeppersuccess.com. Coming up on today's show, the power of a patient newsletter, a question about Google AdWords, and a very useful clinical tool I recently added to my practice. I searched 3 years for this thing and I finally found it. I'm Matt Perry, and this is the show that helps audiologists like you get what you really want. More happy patients and more profits. Students of marketing quickly figure out that there are a ton of awesome ways to generate business, but it's impossible to implement them all. So we have to pick and choose how we want to invest our time and money based on what kind of return on investment we can anticipate. One of the most common ways to market a medical practice is through the use of a patient newsletter. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but until recently, my practice didn't have a patient newsletter. I always knew it was a good thing to do, and it was on my list of things to do, but I just never got around to creating one. And it wasn't a top priority, mainly because of the amount of time required to implement it. During a recent marketing meeting, I was asked by a close friend of mine, who's also a very successful marketer, how often I mailed out my patient newsletter. I sheepishly admitted that I didn't have a patient newsletter, and that yes, I knew it was stupid of me. And he agreed, stating that yes, it was stupid of me, and then it quickly became a priority. Well, 3 months ago, I created the first edition of my quarterly patient newsletter, and I have now seen the light. Within days, patients I hadn't seen in quite a while were just calling up the office for appointments or stopping in to schedule an appointment. 2 of them came in the door reporting that they were now ready to get new hearing aids and they needed an appointment. Well, looking back, I wish I had done it much earlier. Our industry is one that moves both quickly and slowly simultaneously. The technology moves quickly and the patients move slowly, in more ways than one. We all know that it often takes several years for someone with hearing loss to get to the point where they're ready to actually do something about it. And from the moment that they finally purchase those hearing aids, they aren't going to start thinking about upgrading them for a few more years. So the thing is, you never know when they're going to be ready. And when they are ready, whenever that time is, it's crucial that your practice is at the front of their mind and not somebody else's practice. A regular newsletter is a great way to accomplish this. And it's also a great way to give your practice a more personal touch. Remember, all things being equal, people choose to do business with a friend. And with all things being unequal, they still choose to do business with a friend. Today's question comes from James in Colorado. James says, a few months ago I paid someone $4,000 to set up a Google pay-per-click campaign for my practice. After a few weeks I had spent several hundreds of dollars in clicks, but I still hadn't received any patients from it. So I discontinued the service with no new patients. I feel like I just flushed a ton of money down the toilet. Does pay-per-click work in our industry? Well, pay-per-click campaigns can work in our industry, but only if they're set up well. They can also cause you to lose a lot of money. For those who don't know, Google's pay-per-click campaign is called AdWords. When you search for something on Google, 2 types of results show up, organic and paid. The paid or sponsored results show up at the top of the search results and down the right side. If you click on one of those ads, Google charges the owner of the ad money, anywhere from a few cents to several dollars, depending on a whole bunch of different factors. Businesses like pay-per-click advertising because you only pay if people actually click on the ad. and Google likes it because they make a ton of money with it. In our industry, most practices and manufacturers are paying a few dollars per click. And I can also tell you that in our industry, most people are doing it completely wrong. A lot of practices set up an ad just like this one. Anderson's Hearing Centers, hearing testing and hearing aids provided by doctors of audiology, and then they provide the web address. And then they think of every keyword they can come up with, telling Google when they want their ad to appear. They'll list keywords like hearing aids, hearing test, audiologist, BTE hearing aids, Starkey, Oticon Agile, etc. The audiologists who really put a lot of effort into this end up with lists including several hundred keywords. And their ads show up anytime someone searches for those keywords. This is the wrong way to do it. And after speaking with Dave, I found out that this is basically the way his $4,000 consultant set it up. Now, I happen to know quite a bit about Google AdWords. It's kind of my thing. I'm actually a Google certified AdWords specialist. I'm probably the only person in the world to hold certifications from AAA, ASHA, and Google. I could probably spend an entire 2 days teaching audiologists how to successfully use AdWords to grow their practices. And maybe someday I'll do that. But right now, let me just give you the basics. If you're going to use Google AdWords, at a minimum, follow these 3 rules. Number 1, set up geographic areas appropriately. If your practice is in Oakland, California, you don't want your ads showing up when someone in Topeka, Kansas searches for an audiologist. In fact, you probably don't want to show up when someone from just an hour away searches. Google makes it very easy to limit the geographical area where your searches show up. Make sure that your area is appropriately small. When I type in audiologist from my office, there are a couple ads that pop up from offices over an hour away. In a metropolitan area, people generally don't travel that far to see an audiologist. These practices are paying for clicks that will never generate patients. They need to shrink their geographical area. Number 2, use many different ads, each with just a few keywords. If someone searches for Oticon Agile, you don't want your generic business card ad to show up. You want at least a hearing aid related ad to show up, and ideally you want one that would appeal specifically to people searching for Oticon Agile. Number 3, make sure you send them to an appropriate page when they click on your ad. If someone searches for custom earplugs and they click on your ad, which mentions that you do custom earplugs, don't send them to your home page about hearing and balance testing. They'll click the back button and they'll go somewhere else. Send them to a page about custom earplugs. Pay-per-click done right works. Do you have an audiology marketing question you're just dying to ask? Or a question you think might be of interest to other people? I love to answer it on the show. Please submit your questions via the Ask Matt link at audiologymarketingnow.com. Okay, I don't know if you guys are going to care about this much or not, but my guess is at least some of you will find it useful. I'm a strong believer in having speakers sitting outside the booth broadcasting the patient talkback. Remember the first AARP tip we mentioned, always bring a friend or relative? Well, sitting outside a booth while someone else is being tested can get really boring. If the clinician is listening through headphones, the family member outside the booth doesn't hear much. But if you have talkback speakers, they can hear the patient's responses and they can be a little more involved in the process. Speakers are great when supervising students as well. Well, I had a hard time finding an affordable way to add talkback speakers to my booth. It'd be simple enough to split and amplify the headphone signal, but my audiometer uses a proprietary plug, so it wasn't that easy. For the past 3 years, I used a cheap microphone designed for a PC inside the booth, attached to an old laptop outside the booth with amplified speakers attached to that, and it worked pretty well. But we always had to make sure the recording devices window was open on the laptop and on top of any other windows. Otherwise, the microphone monitoring would turn off and then we couldn't hear the patient anymore. Well, I've been trying for 3 years to get rid of this laptop. I tried 2 different baby monitor systems, but the sound quality was awful. I tried plugging a karaoke mic into a small guitar amplifier, but the range of the microphone wasn't very good. I even asked a professional video producer one time if he had any ideas. He recommended a conference room microphone plugged into a guitar amplifier. That didn't work either, because conference room microphones require either a battery or a bias charge from the amplifier. Well, I went around asking manufacturers at AAA if they had any commercial solutions, and none of them seemed to have any. Well, last week I installed this. This is the TCC TC720 microphone and phonograph preamp. It's available at Amazon for about 50 bucks. See the link below the video. And using a couple Radio Shack adapters, you plug in a cheap PC microphone into the front and a pair of cheap amplified PC speakers into the back, and you're good to go. The preamp supplies the bias voltage required to power the microphone, which is what I was missing. So now, without the use of an old laptop, friends and family can hear for themselves how a high frequency loss causes people to swap K sounds for T sounds and mix up FS and TH. They can be involved in the process instead of just sitting there in silence, analyzing your interior decorating skills. Well, that's it for today's show. If you get a chance, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can leave your comments in the section below the video at audiologymarketingnow.com. And be sure to tune in next time to learn more practical modern marketing methods designed to get you more of what you really want. More happy patients and more profits.